over at BangTheBook.com, we're doing all of that stuff, covering everything for you. That's why we are your one-stop shop for sports betting news and information. NBA, NHL, college football, NFL, soccer, golf, tennis, NASCAR, UFC, esports. You name it, we've got it over at BangTheBook.com. We've got some college basketball stuff coming your way here for the start of the season on Tuesday as well. So plenty of good things from a very strong group of writers. Make sure you head on over there and check all of that out. And also, probably tomorrow, I would say, I'll be putting together a Breeders' Cup Classic preview for you. I think the post draw is today for the set of races at Santa Anita. So we'll talk about the Breeders' Cup Classic here as well. Finally, as you know, this and every edition of Bang the Book Radio, presented by our friends over at DSI Sportsbook. BTB and the number 200 is that promo code. 100% deposit match bonus for the Sportsbook, 100% deposit match bonus for the live casino at BetDSI. It's only a game until you bet it. Two guests on the program here today, and our leadoff hitter, appropriately enough, as we begin with Game 7, is Bryan Leonard from WagerTalk.com. Bryan, how's it going today, man?
Everything's going great. Busy day for myself, and hopefully we can get a lot of information out to you, not only this podcast, but our videos we do over at Wager Talk. And an excited day. We've got a few extra people in from out of town this week. So we've got some soccer we're going to talk about. A lot of sports we normally don't own those videos. So I'm excited to do it. And hopefully we can get a lot of winners for people this weekend.
Well, that's certainly the goal here and certainly the hope. And let's see if we start with one in Game 7 of the World Series. Max Scherzer, assuming he's going to be good to go through yesterday in a side session, said he was fine. He'll go up against Zach Greinke here in the winner-take-all Game 7 of the World Series. It's been Washington money here so far. Houston opened in the minus 150, minus 145 range out there in the marketplace. Now Houston down in the low minus 130s for this one. First and foremost, Bryan, do you agree with the line move here?
I think I do. I think the line right now is where it should be. My concern is I have concerns about both starting pitchers. Scherzer, because of the way he's been in and out of the lineup, not feeling well every day. They even talked about it in the game yesterday when he started warming up, that at least he was feeling good yesterday. We'll see what happens today. And I agree with that. I'm assuming he's going to come out and he's going to pitch well because of all the medical staff that they have at that level. But you don't really know. You don't know until he gets on the mound. And as for the Greinke standpoint, when was the last time that we trusted Zach Greinke in a pressure situation? He's been a great pitcher in his career, but we've already seen, when he pitches in a big, when he pitches in LA and he pitches in big games, that he has struggled a little bit. And a lot of that has been, what he's fought his entire career. And he's not good with crowds. He doesn't like any of that. And so that's something you've got to take into your handicapping here. And, these teams, and we've seen this already, especially Houston's done a terrific job of getting deep in the account of these starting pitchers. And, it wouldn't surprise me at all, especially from the Houston standpoint, that we see Urquidy or one of the other starters come in after 3 innings or whatever, and they just say to Greinke, go out there and give us what you got. It's good as you can for now, because, it's the last game of the series. Every pitcher is available. That's something you like when you're playing an under. But this is the third time a lot of these guys have seen these pitchers, second and third time, and I think I give an advantage to the offense tonight. If I'm going to pass on the game, but I'm going to keep an eye on in-game betting and possibly get a play on the offense. These offenses in this series have matched up very well, in my opinion, against these dominant starting pitchers. And we've got some of the best starting pitchers in baseball in this series. So usually you would feel the home team would have more of a slight edge in Game 7s, because we talk about that all the time. But it really hasn't panned out that way as much in baseball, at least lately. We'll have to see how it goes. And there's plenty of other games on the board. I mean, you don't have to bet baseball, but I've had a great baseball season, but I find myself passing a lot in this World Series.
Yeah, I can't blame you for that. And, as I break this one down, obviously you worry about the health factors for Scherzer. You worry about Greinke in a big spot. And, he kind of battled and bobbed and weaved through 4 2/3 in his first start here in the World Series. We'll see if he's forced to do that again. What'll be so interesting to me is how the two managers handle this game. Because as you said, really everybody except for Strasburg and Verlander available to these managers here tonight. We know we're going to see Patrick Corbin. We know we're going to see Garrett Cole. It's just a matter of when those guys actually come into the game. And then what happens after that? How long do you push Garrett Cole or Patrick Corbin in relief? Corbin, I think, in a little bit better of shape than Cole, given that, Corbin is a guy that has already relieved here in this postseason. I think it's something that he'll be a little bit more comfortable with. But then you look at Washington. What's your confidence level in Sean Doolittle? I think it's pretty high. What about Daniel Hudson? Do you have anybody else besides those two guys? If I'm Washington, the answer is no. So I think you've got to push Corbin as hard as you can if Scherzer runs into trouble or some discomfort pops up. I think for Houston, again, with their back end of the bullpen, maybe a little bit better equipped, but this will be a game where the managers can really have a tremendous impact in terms of putting their guys in positions to succeed. And I'm really interested to see how it plays out.
Yeah, this is one of the few game sevens that, to me, are pretty equally matched. It's hard to find an edge in this contest, but it's been a hell of a series. I mean, I've enjoyed watching it. The end of the baseball season, college basketball starts on Tuesday, so one handicap sport ends, and we've got another one coming up. So never ending in this industry.
Last thing I'll ask you about here, obviously both of us Indians fans, you've got Michael Brantley and Joe Smith for the Astros. You've got Asdrubal Cabrera and Yan Gomes for the Nationals. As a Tribe fan here, looking at some of our former boys out there, who are you rooting for to get that World Series ring?
It's interesting that you say this because I watch the games with my wife because she's a huge baseball fan. And 1 minute she's cheering for one team, the next minute she's cheering for the other. And I said, "What are you doing?" She goes, "Well, I want our Indians players to do well." I'd love to see Michael Brantley win a championship. He's one of the classiest guys in baseball. Everybody I know that knows him just loves him. Nothing against any of the other guys, but I've got a soft spot for Brantley in my heart. And he did what he had to do, and I can't blame him. The Indians weren't going to pay him. And plus, being an Indians fan, it's also nice to have the thoughts in the back of your mind that the following year you can knock off the World Series champions. I don't think the Indians are going to do it unless they make some moves that we don't know about or expect. But, I guess that's the way I'm looking at it.
All right, fair enough. I've kind of gone back and forth. I mean, I've always loved Asdrubal Cabrera and, Yan Gomes as well. But like you said, it wouldn't be bad to see Brantley get one either. So, hey, you know what? I'm hoping for a good game. I'm hoping for a lot of drama here tonight. And I'm also hoping that next year I can get back to that feeling of living and dying with every pitch in the playoffs, because I wasn't sure how much I would miss it until I went without it. And it's really hard when you've had a team that's been in the playoffs. And this is true of any sport and fan of any team. It's really hard when they've been in the playoffs and played those high leverage types of games. It's hard to get into the regular season, and you get to this point in time and you really miss it. And so I'm hoping the Indians can figure some things out and get back there next year.
Yeah, we're finding the same thing out here in Las Vegas with our Golden Knights. We've been spoiled the first two seasons, and now, it used to be when people would beg you for extra tickets. Now you can't give them away in some instances. We're getting spoiled out here in Las Vegas, and I hate to see it because there's so many teams out there in hockey that have struggled all these years, and their fans are so diehard. I'm a little bit upset about what's going on out here in Vegas, but maybe it's just in my mind. Who knows? They still sell out every game.
All right, so something we want to talk about here a little bit today is the NBA. I know you've been doing quite a bit of work here in the NBA. The NBA season, a week old here tonight. Last week, opening night, I think was on Tuesday. So I guess a little more than a week old now at this point in time. But what have you seen so far? What are some of the takeaways you've got with about a week's worth of action?
Yeah, so far this season, there's been some surprise teams, obviously. I've been very impressed by Atlanta. I did use Atlanta yesterday, and obviously Trey Young gets injured in the first and is out of the game, and we end up losing that game. But Atlanta's been playing very good ball. A lot of the teams that people expected to perform very well, the Philadelphias, the Denvers, they've come out a little bit slow. I'm actually surprised the Lakers have gelled so well early on in the season. I think a lot of that may have to do with the teams they've been playing. Once they play, well, they struggled against the Clippers. Once they play better teams, they'll be exposed a little bit early on. But normally, when you get players who dominate the ball like the Lakers have, it's going to take them a while to get going and start playing together. But they've been somewhat of a surprise. Golden State came back and took no mercy the last time out. But, I liked Golden State coming into the season for their starters, but that bench on that team is one of the weakest. And it's going to be very tough for Golden State in this season when your best player is small and, in my regards, a little bit fragile. You could see Golden State really fall off if Curry's not 100%. Portland's played very good ball so far. This is a team a lot of people wrote off because of the changes they made in the offseason. I've been impressed with Portland. So it's been a nice season. Toronto, other than the game one where they had the big comeback, but that was a ring ceremony game. I like to bet against those kind of teams. So Toronto surprised me a little bit, and yeah, it's been an exciting season so far. We've been able to make a little bit of money thus far out of the gate, and in most cases, we're on the right side. Sometimes we get the injuries that cost us, or just a poor performance. But so far, I'm feeling pretty good about the way I'm looking at the NBA so far.
Something that's been interesting to me here is that the under 30-23-1 so far, which is kind of surprising because early on in the season, a lot of teams play with a heightened pace. They're all fresh. They're all ready to go. So the pace generally tends to be a little bit quicker. And also we're seeing, some of the regular defensive juggernauts struggling a little bit on that end of the floor. I mean, Utah's played very, very good defense. They've got an interesting game tonight against the Clippers, but a team like the Spurs giving up over 114 points per game. We've seen Boston kind of be up and down a little bit. Milwaukee giving up 118 points per game, although they're also playing at the fastest pace in the NBA here so far. But I thought that was kind of interesting. I sort of felt like there would be more overs than unders early on in the year, but thus far the odds makers have done a pretty good job with totals.
Well, when you're rested, defense, I happen to like teams that are rested from a defensive standpoint. So far, the teams haven't had too many tough road trips. Now we're starting to get into some now. So I think the scoring will be up just because you don't have your defensive feet behind you. But yeah, I don't do a lot with totals. Just about all my plays are sides. If I find a total, I will give it out. But my first inkling is to play the sides in these games. And yeah, I hadn't noticed that, but I'll keep an eye on it.
Do you ever tease the NBA?
No. There's certain situations where if you can get you don't tease, but if you can buy points at a certain number and you're already getting an advantage and you're going through the 5 area or whatever, I know some pros that do that kind of thing. But for the most part, the only thing I ever tease is NFL. Don't do any college football. Don't do any basketball. So I know people who do it. I'm not going to give away the secrets, but it's been a few years since I've talked to these guys, so I don't know if the value is still there or not.
So in terms of your NBA betting approach here, are you looking mostly for scheduling type spots, or are you finding that maybe some teams just have mismatches against certain opponents?
Well, it's very similar to what I do in other sports where I look for teams who outperformed the final of the previous game. For example, team like in college football, I look for teams who should have won the game and yet didn't. And all people look at is they see that they've lost. Now, basketball is a little bit different because you got an 82 game sample size, and game by game doesn't matter as much as it does in football. But in college football, when you've got 12 games as your is your sample size, and people see a team winning when they didn't deserve to win. That is something that I think we could take advantage of, and I've had a lot of success doing that this year. Is betting on the teams that are coming off of a loss that they actually, when you dig down into the numbers, were the better team, and then betting against the team that won. I mean, take a look at just for the first game on the board in the NBA, the New York Knicks. New York Knicks won that game last time out, and they pulled the upset. But if you look at that game, they were down. The average spread in that game was 9 for the opposition, and they came back and they ended up winning that game by like 7 or something. So people are going to look at that game and say, hey, you know, the Knicks came back, they're 1-3 or whatever. Maybe they're not as bad as what we thought. Well, if you dig deep into those games, they were completely outplayed in every game they played so far this season. So there may be some advantage on going against the Knicks tonight. There's a few spots on the card. You know, Houston's been able to win, and they haven't been overly impressive. You know, Cleveland. Chicago was the game that played the Knicks, and Chicago dominated that game and lost. They play Cleveland, a team that they could take out some frustrations on. I put that up as a free play today. Well, I've got Chicago. So just early on, trying to look at teams a little bit different way other than, you know, just the final box score. I don't have time to watch every single game, so I go through the stats after the games are over. And there's certain places out there on the internet where you can get more of a game flow type of thing. And I think that's the way to take a look at it.
Well, I guess one final question here in the NBA, and then we'll flip over to college football side of things is, you know, in football, we can look at something like turnover margin, you know, and sort of say, well, that team was -4 in turnovers. They shouldn't have won that game, or, you know, they shouldn't have lost by as much as they did. Turnovers played such a big impact. What set of statistics are you looking for to sort of, you know, quantify that point in the end, or qualify that point in the NBA of, you know, that team shouldn't have lost that game, or that team shouldn't have won that game? Are there specific stats you point to?
Yeah, like I said, I'll take a look at the average spread as the game goes on, that kind of thing. Obviously, if you've got a 20-point favorite, it's going to take a long time before they get up to winning by 20 points. But you know, if you've got a team that is in a pick'em range and the entire game they're down by 5 points, then all of a sudden they go on a 10-0 run at the end of the game, most people will note that, hey, they covered that spread, they won that game straight up. Whereas, you know, 46 out of the 48 minutes of the game, they've trailed by 5. So that's something to take a look at. Also in the NBA and college basketball, I'm more of a situational where if a team is shooting lights out, especially from 3, I tend to fade that team in the second half or things like that in live betting. You know, teams always revert back to the norm in the long run. And I find a lot of things that I do, if a team gets off to just a great start shooting threes in the first half, you tend to fade them in the second half, and it does work out pretty well. I give out second half plays. I can't sell them to clients. Obviously, you just don't have enough time, so I give them out on Twitter for free. So if you follow us at B Leonard Sports on Twitter, you can get those free plays. And yeah, that's just something you take a look at if you have a chance to watch the game, which I say, I tell you, you don't have a chance to watch them all. You could see how open these guys are on the threes, and it's a little bit opposed to how without watching the game, you can't really tell. But there's so much luck involved in shooting 3-pointers that if a team relies a lot on them and they're just not hitting him in one half, you can come back and bet on the second half, and there's some advantage in that.
All right, so we shift gears over to college football here for Saturday, and we begin with game 327, 328, Akron and Bowling Green. And again, you're probably not going to hear about this game on too many of the other podcasts or any other videos that you watch here, but we're going to talk about it here, and not just because Bryan and I both alums of the University of Akron, but because I think this is kind of an interesting game. You've got really 2 bottom 3 teams in everybody's power ratings. I'm sure they're the bottom 3 in yours. Akron's 129, Bowling Green 128. And Bowling Green is a 6-point favorite here in this game.
Yeah, but I don't know if I'm going to touch it either way. I saw one of my colleagues, Rob Vino, put a tweet out yesterday that you could get rich by betting against Akron. I think he said they were 22-1 against the spread or some ridiculous number. And I tweeted out, it says, yeah, we're due. Because at this point, if teams are that bad where you've got Akron and Bowling Green here, there's better ways to spend your money. I mean, my number says that the line is probably right. In fact, I probably would have Bowling Green as a 7-point favorite here. But that does not mean I'll be playing Akron. Akron's a team that may have Akron as the worst team at this point in college football. UMass, they lose at UMass when they go as a road favorite. That was one of the funniest lines I've seen all season. This one's right up there. Don't trust either team. And when you've got teams on the fringes, I usually like to bet, like, for example, here, normally I would look at this and say neither one of these teams knows how to win. So you would look to take the points with Akron. Problem is, I've seen enough Akron games. I'm a glutton for punishment, I guess, because I watch the Akron games and they don't do anything right. And at this point, I cannot trust them. I know they want to win a game, but how do you bet on them? I've got nothing in this one. I don't want any part of either one of these teams. As much as I'd love to be able to take points with going against a Bowling Green team that has really struggled, I just can't do it.
That tweet that you're referencing here from @RobVinoSports, and again, you replied to this on Twitter. Akron is combined 1-22-1. They're 0-8 in the game, 0-7-1 in the first half, 1-7 in the second half ATS. So the Zips have been an outright disaster. And I wound up taking Bowling Green here in this one. My line's more like 9.5. So I actually thought this line was going to go up. The fact that it hasn't kind of scares me a little bit. But that tweet kind of illustrates what's going on here with this Akron team, that they are so beyond awful, and everybody knows it, and they still can't cover a spread. You would think that there would be some price inflation going against Akron at this point in time, and you said your line's 7, mine's 9.5. We're back down to 6 out there market wide, but I mean, I wonder if this Akron team even cares. I wonder if they even want to win, because again, they know that this is a transitional year with a first-year head coach, whereas at least Bowling Green has shown me something. And I know that the week after the Toledo game, Bowling Green kind of regressed back a little bit, but at least Bowling Green has shown me something. I had to take Bowling Green here.
Yeah, they had that one game, and I watched that game. They dominated Toledo, and the problem you get when you watch the games is you don't know which is the real deal. And the next week, Bowling Green gets blown out, and then Toledo gets blown out, and then we realize that it wasn't Bowling Green, it was Toledo that really didn't come to play that game. Nice to know ahead of time. We didn't know it until afterwards. So I'm sure Akron wants to win. Nobody wants to go through the season without winning a football game. When they played Kent State, I thought that would be the game because that's their big rivalry. And Kent State just dominated them. And Kent's at a slightly different level than these two, but you let it off. The MAC has been really bad this year, and I've known it was really bad this year. So I've been very happy with the lack of games I've given out in the MAC this season. Normally, a lot of my portfolio has MAC games in it, but I don't trust any of these teams. Now, once we get to bowls, if any of these MAC teams are in a bowl, and there will be a few, there'll be teams that I could fade. But by that point, everybody knows that the MAC is down. And so we'll have to see how it goes. But Akron's going to show up to win. I mean, they just don't have the talent.
Well, that being said, you do have a MAC game up on your card over at wagertalk.com for this weekend game, 335, 336, Buffalo and Eastern Michigan, a play that you have over at WagerTalk. So I encourage everyone to go and check that one out. We jump down to game 353, 354 here, Northern Illinois and Central Michigan. And I think this line kind of encapsulates everybody's thoughts on the MAC. You had Central Michigan a 2-point favorite. You've got Central Michigan a 1-point favorite at Bookmaker. You've got the game Pick'em at 3 different books offshore. And you also have Northern Illinois favored at some of the offshore books, including Pinnacle and Matchbook, which does suggest to a degree Northern Illinois the sharper of the two sides here in this game. But again, it almost seems like with a game like this and with this line at Pick'em, this just kind of tells us that we have no idea what we're going to get week in and week out from these MAC teams.
Yeah, I look over the line service, and I've got, bookmakers got Central as a 1-point favorite, and a few of the others have the Northern Illinois 1-point favorite. Everybody else got to pick them. I make it Central Michigan 1, so I'm in that same range. Northern's had better game scores. They played a little bit better ball, but I don't trust Northern. That's a team that's really struggled offensively all season long. The line's, I've looked at it from many angles, and the line's really where I thought it was going to be. Not much value here. So I'd like to, give you some great information, but I just don't have it. It's two play against teams for me.
Yeah, I mean, my line is Central -1 as well. So you and I are in the same spot, and at least there's that. With all the inconsistency and the Jekyll and Hyde-ness of these MAC teams here, I'm happy to know that at least I've got these two power rated in the proper range. But yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's hard when you talk about the MAC and you try to find some angles on them. I will say this, something I talked about with Rolf Michaels yesterday, and something we can touch on very quickly here. When these MAC teams pick up a 7th loss, I mean, these teams don't have any delusions of grandeur about ever making a college football playoff. Obviously, you want to win the conference, but, this has been a conference dominated by 2 or 3 teams the last several years. Really, your only end game in the MAC is making it to either the conference championship game or a bowl game. And it does feel like some of these MAC teams, even though they're kind of all beating each other, when they get that 7th loss and they're not going to a bowl game, you really do wonder about the psychology of those teams.
Yeah, you definitely do. And I listened to that podcast, and Rob makes a great point in that regard. The thing is, even if some of these teams are bowl eligible, when you get down to this level of Sun Belt and the MAC, even if they are bowl eligible, a lot of times they'll be passed over because they don't bring enough fans to the games. I think that, at least in my mind, works more for the Power 5 schools in that regard. You got Northern Illinois, who's already lost 5 games. Their victories, FCS game against Illinois State. They win at Ohio at 39-36. And by the way, Ohio was a team we've talked about a lot early on this season, how they thought they were going to have a cakewalk through the schedule, and they haven't. Actually, Ohio's starting to play a little bit better ball now. That's one of the teams that I'm looking to find spots to play on. Don't know if I'll do anything here, but that's one that is playing a little bit better ball than what they played earlier. But they lose it. They beat Akron 49-0, which is what it is. But Central Michigan, Toledo, Eastern Michigan, and Western Michigan coming up. This is a team that's normally going to bowl games. A lot of these teams in the MAC don't. So right now, with the 5 losses, a loss here could definitely really keep them out of any bowl, even with 6 losses. So we'll have to see. But yeah, that's a great point. Is you always want to look at the schedule and see I think it matters more when a team comes into the season with those expectations. We see it all the time in the NFL, where a team comes in, they were supposed to win their division. All of a sudden, they're not going to win their division, and you see them fade. The veterans fade as the season goes on. A team like an Akron or a Bowling Green did not come into the season expecting to go to a bowl. A team like Northern Illinois did.
All right, so we shift gears over to the NFL here, and we've kind of had this discussion at a few different points throughout the show about teams that should have won and didn't, and maybe they're pretty good play-on spots the following week. That brings us to game 457, 458 here, Chicago and Philadelphia, and the Bears should have won last week. And not only that, they should have covered last week, but they have that 1-point loss to the Chargers, and I guess turnabout is kind of fair play because the Chargers are a team notorious for losing games that they're supposed to win. They finally get one back here last week against the Bears. The question is, can you really take the Bears here this week against an Eagles team coming off of maybe its most complete and most impressive performance of the year, now a 5-point favorite hosting Chicago?
Yeah, I only had one play last week, and that was Buffalo against Philadelphia. And it's rare that you can watch maybe two possessions in a game and realize you've got the wrong side. And that's what it was last week in Buffalo. Buffalo was obviously the wrong side in that game, and Philadelphia's looked good. But Philadelphia is one of those teams, a lot of veterans on this team, and they've had many games this year where they've struggled. Most of it has been because of injuries. So when they get healthy, that's a team you're looking to back. After playing Chicago, they played New England, Seattle. So they've got a rough string here. They've gone Minnesota, Dallas, Buffalo, Chicago, New England, Seattle. That's been a tough road for Philadelphia. Chicago's one of those teams that has found ways to lose, as you pointed out, losing last week by a point to the Chargers in a game that they, believe it or not, they had 15 more first downs in that game than the Chargers did, and they lose that game. That's something you don't really see. But Chicago, that just shows you what Chicago is. Chicago's not a team that can stretch the field. They've got to grind it out. They're like an Iowa or one of those teams in college football at Michigan State that offense isn't going to come easy. And playing a team with the talent that Philadelphia has is going to make it a little bit tough. Philadelphia's had problems with their defensive backs, had a lot of injuries all season long. But I don't know if Chicago has that ability to beat them in the passing game. You take a look at the numbers for Trubisky. His quarterback rating is only 81.4, 5 touchdowns, 3 interceptions on the season. That's not really what you're looking to get out of a quarterback that's got that breakaway opportunity. Philadelphia just played 3 straight games on the road, now coming back home for 3 straight. I lean with Philadelphia here, but Chicago's been finding ways to lose. And if you've lost to Oakland just a few weeks ago, that tells you that you're being outcoached. And Oakland's, say what you want about Gruden and the way he does things over there. Oakland's really impressed me, and I never thought I'd say it, but I look for times to play the Raiders at this point because I like the changes that they've made there and what they've done, and I haven't seen that all season long. I definitely didn't expect that coming into the season. So it's the Eagles or nothing for me, but that's a brutal stretch of games that the Eagles are on right now.
Speaking of the Raiders, let's touch on that game here as we take a look at game 465, 466. Oakland, a 2 or 2.5 point favorite, found a way to cover against Houston. I've already had my Bill O'Brien rant here for this week, but this is an interesting one because Detroit did let the Giants in the back door, but by and large, played pretty well, had some distractions, had some things going on with their secondary. They traded Quandre Diggs. There was some talk that maybe they would trade Darius Slay. So there was a lot going on with that Detroit team, yet they rallied, found a way to get that victory. Now they make the long trip out west to Oakland, again, where the Raiders are a 2-point favorite.
Yeah, I think the Raiders are slightly cheap here. You take a look at the game grades on the season. Detroit's at 82.0, the Raiders at 82.6. If you add in a 2-point home field for that, maybe 2.5 point home field, you're looking at the Raiders 3. So it's a slight edge there from a number standpoint, at least in my mind, on the Raiders. Raiders coming off back-to-back losses, but you take a look at the schedule that they've had, and it's been some crazy. Going the trip to London and all, they haven't been back home since they played Kansas City in week 2. So there are going to be some Raiders fans at the game that are going to be excited to be there. And it's always a tough place to play when you've got the fans that Oakland has. First of 2 back-to-back games here for Detroit coming off of that Giants victory. But they lost, as you mentioned, 3 games before that. Close games, lose to Kansas City by 4. Lose to Green Bay by 1, and then that Minnesota game where they lose by 12. But Detroit's been involved in a lot of tight games this year. It wouldn't surprise me if this is another one of those that comes down to a field goal or 4 points coming down to the final score in this game. Even though I'm not a huge Patricia fan, I think he's done a nice job with Detroit here. So these are 2 teams that I think are under the radar a little bit. I'd rather play on them when they played somebody else. but a slight lean to Oakland here.
Bryan Leonard, professional handicapper over at WagerTalk.com. We covered a lot of ground here on today's show, and you guys do the same over there at Wager Talk.
Yeah, we do. We do a terrific job. We've got a lot of guys who specialize in certain sports. Carmen Bianco will be in from Canada, talk some soccer today. And we've got 2 or 3 guys that do soccer, do very well. We've got a guy that does a lot of, we got 2 guys, I believe, that do the MMA, do a fine job on that. So we've got guys that do just about every sport out there. Obviously, I handicap what I'm good at, and I just take their advice on things like that. But I do want to touch on my success on 5% plays, 31-11 on 5% plays. I've got my first NBA 5% play up right now up on the site. If it doesn't win, we put 150% of what you had to pay for that play back into your account. So it's really a no-brainer. You can get that over right now at wagertalk.com. Our first NBA 5% play, 31-11 on those, and that's for the entire year. Very selective on our top plays, and it's worked out very well for us.
Well, of course, once again, make sure you follow at @BLeonardSports on Twitter. Get those second half plays and also all the other insights that Bryan shares on his Twitter page. Bryan Leonard, professional handicapper, wagertalk.com. As always, my friend, we appreciate the time. Thank you so much, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Sounds terrific. Everybody have a great week.